Welcome to the 245 podcast, which is the amount of times the worship team sings the bridge during worship of a song.
Probably.
No reaction from Joey.
That one hurt my soul.
Well, in the podcast studio today is me, Micah, and we have Joey Ritzma.
Hey, yo.
Josh is not able to join us today, but actually, guys, this is a very special episode because we have our very first guest on the podcast.
Peace up, A-Town down. Yeah.
Kelsey Reynolds.
Yo.
Hey, here we have Kelsey. How are you doing today, Kelsey?
You know, I'm great. How are you, Micah?
I am doing awesome. Yes, we have Kelsey Reynolds, friend of me and Joey's.
I don't know if I'm
Here
friends
at
with Joey, but, you know.
Friend of mine here at Northwestern. She knows who Joey is.
We're acquaintances.
They kind of know. Yeah, Kelsey is in a grade older than us, but she is a ministry major. What is your exact major? You know.
Yeah, that's kind of a big title. So here we are with a ministry major and a youth and emerging adult studies concentration with a minor in science.
Minor in science?
What?
I did not know that.
Yeah, I have a minor in science, you guys.
Is that's from the nursing classes?
Where's
isn't
that
it?
going to get you?
You know, probably nowhere. But you never know. Like, kids might be like, I need help with my science homework. But yeah, I was a nursing major for a year and a half. And so then I fulfilled all those credits through that. So yeah, science
So it's
minor.
not like you chose to be a science minor. It's kind of like just
No, it's default.
you got it. You just happened to get it because you had the credits.
Yeah, they said, just put it on your thing. I said, okay.
Cool. Yeah, well, me and Kelsey just got back from the South Campus RA retreat today. We went to an escape room.
It went crazy.
We were in different groups, so we were in different rooms. Apparently, my group had the easiest room of the 6, and they had the hardest.
And we did better, obviously.
Well, we got out first.
Well,
But ours apparently was easier.
Yes. You had the easiest one, and we had the hardest one. So obviously, we did better.
How'd your team work together? Was it?
I mean, at the beginning, it was kind of like we all split off and did separate things.
Yeah, that's kind of what we did too.
And then we came together because we got stuck.
Yeah.
But
So we did that. We went to a park, chilled for a while,
Yeah.
and then we went to Culver's.
Yeah.
And they had $2 pints of ice cream.
Did you know that? Sundays, they have
Sundays.
$2 pints of ice cream.
No, I didn't know that,
Culver's.
and I don't like ice cream,
What?
so I don't
Joey.
care. I
Come
know.
on.
This is why we're not friends.
That is one of the
reasons.
One
Yeah.
of the many reasons. Yeah, we're not friends.
But that's actually cheaper than the actual ice cream one scoop at Culver's. So everyone
Facts.
got that instead of the actual ice cream. So
Well, except for me.
except you. You got that smoothie looking thing. Yeah.
Smoothie.
Yeah. Joey, how was your Sunday? How was your weekend?
My weekend was pretty good. I mean, I was volunteering at church, so that takes up.
Oh yeah, I was there too.
Yeah, you were there too. Yeah.
That's weird. I didn't volunteer this weekend, which is the first time in a while.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, but then I'm there from 2 till 6:30 on Saturday, and then from 7:40 to 10:30.
11:30.
11:30. That's what I meant to say on Sunday. So that takes up a good part of my weekend, and then I went home for a while, and then I've been working on my paper for 4 hours already.
Is this
today.
your 13-page paper?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's been
Imagine.
chipping away at for the last 2 days.
Yeah. It's been going all right.
When was it assigned to you?
Oh, it was assigned at the beginning of the year. We knew about it.
Okay. So you just
goodness.
waited.
Well, it's hard to work up the motivation to start working on the paper when it's 4
That's
weeks
true.
out.
What is your paper on, Joey? Tell us.
Oh,
about it.
you would love to know what this is about. It's qualifications for overseers in the church. And actually, it's working out well for you because
Ooh.
it's the phrase that draws a lot of attention is husband of one wife.
Yeah.
And this is what's interesting. All the commentaries are this is talking about faithfulness in marriage. This is not a requirement for males in leadership. So I still lean toward complementarian because I think men and women work very well together. I'd still say I'm of the opinion that if you're going at the peak leaders, the best of the best, most times they're going to be men. So that's why there's a lot of men and head pastors and stuff like that.
It's so interesting because Joey and I are in ministry classes together. And so we just have these conversations all the time. It's a constant thing in our classes because it's such a debated topic.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do like a full podcast on it.
Oh yeah, we are.
I want to
With-
have like
with the famous Nick Vetch,
Nick.
yeah,
and Kelsey will probably
Yeah.
pop over for that one too.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good one.
I'd love to have like a professor, a female professor. We have really good female professors.
Or like Peter Kapsner. Yeah.
also him. He's got to get on at some point.
That'd be good.
But yeah, we could do like 3-part series with
That'd be
Peter
crazy.
Kapsner. That
Oh
would be
my goodness.
insane.
That'd be really
The
cool.
world,
So
the
wise.
world needs that.
Yeah.
The world would shatter, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he does radio. So
Oh really?
Yeah, he does. He
Yeah.
does stuff over here at the Mel at like 6 o'clock in the morning.
yeah,
For who? For KTIS or for the
Faith
Mel?
Radio.
Faith Radio. Cool.
yeah.
Did
He
not know that.
he answers questions that like people call in. So he's like
Oh.
super good at like thinking on his feet and stuff. So
Would not be me.
yeah, would not be me either. But we're also like 12 years old, so it's
Yeah.
all right. We have a lot to learn and a lot of time to learn.
We have like half a century before we're like real adults
Yep,
yet.
Oh, brother.
So it's gonna be a while.
yep. It'll be a while.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about why we brought Kelsey in.
Yeah, that's probably important.
You should talk about that because I still don't know why we brought her in.
Well,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
we brought her in because I am her friend, not Joey.
Okay.
We just want to chat. No, but we all three of us go to Eagle Brook Church in Minnesota. They have 10, right?
Yeah.
10
It'll be
campuses.
10, yeah.
9 or 10 campuses throughout the Twin Cities. And Kelsey has been getting some really cool opportunities there. She's been not a youth pastor,
Not yet.
one of the youth leaders
Yeah.
for a group of girls, middle school girls, for the last couple of years. And she's been recently getting some cool opportunities to go to different leadership conferences
Yeah.
and learn different things, and some cool possible jobs that could happen. So we brought her on to talk about that and just kind of find out like how Eagle Brook runs and what she learned at this cool conference. So
Do you want to first talk about like how you got plugged into Eagle Brook? Like
Yeah, I
how
wanna
did
hear
you
about that.
start?
That's a good one.
Because it started with your dad, right?
Yeah. So my dad, he is Ham Lake Eagle Brook opened up Easter of, I think it was 2021. Is that
yeah,
right, Micah?
that's right.
2021.
Yep.
And so he got a job there to do. He was just on fire for like the church itself because it was Horizons, but Horizons decided to give the church over to Eagle Brook, and my dad was just super pumped about that because you don't see a ton of that happening like ever within churches. And so my dad was just like, I want to work there. And he's been a pastor in the past, but he just wanted to go there and be there. And so he's now doing like, I forget the official title, but he does a lot of like custodial stuff. And so that summer I was at home and they're like, you should, like, you have a lot of time on your hands. You might as well just go volunteer on Sundays. I said, okay, like I like to hang out with preschoolers, might as well. And so I started as a small group leader for preschoolers on Sundays at 9 o'clock, and then I could go to the service at 11 with my family. And then that summer, the youth pastors like saw me in the preschool stuff, and he's like, hey, you should come help out with Summer Takeover, which is a 3-day middle school event for students. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And so I drove to the cities 3 days in a row, and I just like was in awe. Like I just loved everything that was happening there, and it really like honestly turned my life around, and it gave me a lot of perspective on my own life. And so then he's like, I want you to come back and be a youth group leader this year. And so last fall of 2021, I started with 6th grade girls, which was a wild experience. Can you imagine 6th grade girls? Like
they
they're
gotta be
crazy.
wild.
They're
that,
wild.
That sounds like a really interesting time.
It was, but like I learned so much from it and I loved it. And so then, yeah, I started with 6th graders, and that whole year went by. And then within that amount of time, I changed my major to ministry, as I kind of alluded to. It was nursing to ministry. And so then I switched my major. And then I was at camp this summer, and then this fall they reached out to me and they're like, hey, we want you to be a part of like this Leadership X thing. I was like, what is this? I know my mom did it, but I don't know what it is. And it's just basically a discipleship program within their church where they teach you like what the church is about and like what their vision culture is, but also like how to be a better leader. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And so I started doing stuff for that. And then they also, I moved up with my girls this year. And so I went from 6th grade to 7th grade girls. And with these 7th grade girls, I have started, it's been 3 weeks now, but the youth pastor approached me and he's like, I want you to start being a team lead type sit. I don't even know how to word it. There's not an official title right now. So it's just I help with doing stage games and all the sort of opening things before the students get there. And then I can also help with the huddle. And the pastor was like, I want you to be able to lead leaders. That's your next step, is to lead leaders and not to lead students, which was kind of a big step. I was like, what the heck? And then with this leadership stuff. So basically right now, all the things that I'm doing is small group preschool leader, large group preschool leader. I left that out. I'm now on stage teaching the kids. I do small group middle school, and then I also do on stage middle school stuff. And then I do Leadership X. So quite busy.
Your involvement went from pretty minimal, but you're involved to pretty high. So you're pretty highly involved now in the youth stuff.
Yeah.
And so have you started kind of leading the group huddles and the other leaders yet, or not really?
Yeah. So this is so new because it was the last week, he approached me and was like, hey, can you start helping with this stuff? And I was like, I would love to. And so right now it's doing all the stage stuff with him at the moment, with the youth pastor. And then I'll move into doing more of the huddle things once probably near the future at some point, I will be moving out of being a small group leader. And so when that happens, I'll be doing more responsibilities with being in the huddle. But as of now, he wants me to how can we make huddles better? And so he's leaving Wednesdays and he's giving me these opportunities to think and incorporate those things. So,
well, what's crazy to me is how quick that turnaround was. So you started in 2021 in youth.
Yeah.
And now you're getting basically promoted to leading the leaders of youth in a year and a half or whatever.
Yeah. That's crazy. Because those leaders, I'm not sure what the age range is of those youth group leaders, but they a lot of them probably are older than you, I'm guessing, because you're only 20 years old.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is the crazy thing is I feel so young, but yet God is obviously opening these doors for me. And so it's just continually following him, but also being humble with that because, it's awesome that I'm having these opportunities and they keep Eagle Brook is such a church where it's you move up and you keep growing in your positions. But it's just it's been a year since I started volunteering, but also being super humble and being this isn't me. It's God has given me gifts and giving it all back to him.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that can get hard. We talk about it in our classes. I don't know if we've talked about it in our classes where power is just so intoxicating. And so if you're on stage and doing all these things, but just realizing that it's not us. It's all for the glory of God. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you hear much about Leadership X before you were offered to join that class? Because I know I've been at volunteering for, I think it's right around a year now. I think it's a little bit less, Mandy said. I think it was actually November when we started.
Oh, okay.
Last year.
Yeah.
But I think I've only heard one sentence of anyone mentioning Leadership X from a staff member.
Yeah. So Leadership X is I heard about it from my mom, but before that I hadn't, and it's because the pastors select people that they see that they're growing. And they're these are leaders within our church and we want them to see the vision and whatever. And so it's not a talked about thing because I feel if it's talked about, then it's going to be people are going to ask to do it. And it's more of a hey, we want to invite you to do this. And it is a lot of work. It's a year-long process. And you read a bunch of books that they give you and you have to shadow 3 leadership people. And then what is the other thing? You go to conferences and then meetings. And so I went to that day-long leadership thing, which I have here. It's called the Wisdom Event. And so I went to that. It was just it's a tedious process and you graduate at the end. So catch me graduating from college at the same time as graduating from Leadership X.
Nice. You get a diploma you can hang on your wall and frame it.
I don't know. That'd be kind of bougie though.
Your mom could put it on your fridge.
I know. I'd be Mom, be proud of
Jody.
me. Look at this. I know.
Right next to hers, right? Because she graduated
I know.
from there.
Yeah.
I know. I wonder if I have cap and gown. That'd be so cute.
What colors would light blue?
Probably blue and white.
Blue and white, Eagle Brook, cap and gown.
That'd be bougie.
I'll be there.
Facts.
What did your mom think of the training?
She really liked it. I think that a lot of people give Eagle Brook a bad rap
Facts.
from like just the like looking outward in. And so actually getting to know the church and what they stand for, and like, yeah, it might look like lights. It might look like there's like so many different things going on, and it may just look like a show, but it's so much more than a show. And like a lot of things that they talked about at this event was like putting, I have to find the quote. It was basically saying like put others' preferences before your own. Put the purpose before your preference.
Ooh.
And
that's
so,
really good.
And it's just like the purpose is to reach people for Christ. And like some people are coming in and they do things that are super modern for that reason, because it's going to reach people better.
Yeah.
Then what does it say? I think I have it right here. Oh, sacrifice the preference of lost people that was wrong. But be willing to give up preference for his purpose. And so like we have preferences and like we have things that we want within a church, but it's like, can we sacrifice those things for the lost people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think with what Eagle Brook is doing is I think like, I mean, obviously worship, we're worshiping to God, but there needs to be a time where we learn about the word and learn how we're supposed to act as Christians. So it's important that people who don't know Christ, and especially young people, especially in the last 2 years with COVID, who may have not like gone to church much, that they stay for the sermon, because the sermon's important. Mm-hmm. So if we can draw them in with the more modern worship, and get them to stay for the sermon where they'll really learn about Christ, I think is super important. Yeah. So I think that's, I would guess is a purpose behind that.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I do appreciate about Eagle Brook is they're very central around that mission. Like, like at least they have a mission and they're willing to stick with it. I feel like so many churches are doing so many different things. They have so many different focuses. At least Eagle Brook is like, this is our mission. We're going all in on this mission. Everything we do is revolving around that.
Yeah. And like one thing we talk about in our class is like vision statements. You need a vision statement. You need a vision statement. But they talked about at this conference that I went to, the Wisdom event, they were like, okay, like you have vision statements, but how many times are they actually put into play? So like that's why Eagle Brook has a vision culture. And it's like, this is something we put into play in practice every single like day. And so it's just so interesting. Like they have a whole like triangle for the vision culture and like what's the foundation and building it up. And it's just so crazy interesting to like look at that and like the beliefs. What are they going to, like their foundation is, what are they going to die for? Like they have like a central ring and it's like we have die for, defend, and discuss. And the things that they're going to focus on are the things that we die for.
Do you have that? Do you have that in that notebook? Do you want to pull that up? Because I think we should talk about that. Because they introduced that model during a sermon. And I was like, that is it. That is the way to do it. Because the central things like we'll die for, we are willing to give our lives up for, are really basic, fundamental principles that not a lot of people are going to disagree with.
Right.
So what are the ones that they have in there?
So like die for, I think that this goes back to their beliefs, which I think is the next page. I have a whole book in front of me for the people that. So they have 9 core beliefs, and these are the things that they will die for. So like there's a whole list. If you want me to read them, I will.
No, let's go through them. Let's go through them.
Let's talk about each one.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one living sovereign God who eternally exists in 3 persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Boom. Not controversial at all.
Yep. Number 2, Jesus was sent by the Father to live on earth. He was fully God and fully human, yet had no sin. Jesus willingly laid down his life and after 3 days rose from the grave. In doing this, Jesus fulfilled the payment for the world's debt of sin.
Boom.
Yep.
That's so good. And I love how good like the wording is. Like every single word.
They're so specific, and that's the best thing.
Really good.
It's also very accurate to how it's said in Scripture too.
Yep. Number 3, the Holy Spirit was sent by the Father and the Son to convict the world of sin and to empower all who believe in Jesus Christ. He lives in every believer and is a constant helper, teacher, and guide.
Yep.
So those are the 3 things that they said about God. Then these are
And
these are the 3 about people.
Yep.
God created people in his image, and everyone matters to God. All people are sinners and need God's forgiveness. And then 3, those who confess and turn from their sins, trusting in Jesus Christ, will be saved by grace and become children of God with promise of eternal life.
It's just so well written.
It's so well written.
It's amazing.
So we have God, we have people, and then this is the church, the Bible, and Christ's return. So 1, Jesus Christ is the head of the church, and all believing people are members. Number 2, the Bible is the inspired word of God and is the supreme authority in all matters of faith and conduct. And number 3, Jesus Christ will return, and there will be a final judgment.
Ooh.
So those are the things that they say we'll die for.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of Christians will be like, yeah, I'll die for that.
Yeah.
And so then they have their outer rings, like that's their inner ring. And those are the things they're going to talk about. And then the outer rings is defend and discuss. And so defend is the next ring. And it just talks about how churches can get messy in that category.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think what you said before, it's super important for churches to have these vision statements and to live them out, because if you're not sticking to your vision statement, then it's kind of a gray area of like, oh, well, we believe this, but maybe we can be a little flexible for these people or stuff like that. So sticking to your core values is super important, especially in such a big institution of the church.
Right.
And that's biblical. I mean, that's something I've learned a lot in like the last couple of years, is there's a lot more freedom in Christianity than a lot of people think. Like, you can be a part of Eagle Brook and probably disagree with the things that they have in the defend section. But if you agree with those 9 core things, which every Bible-believing Christian should, you're going to cover like 95% of people. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it also like talks about outside of the defend, we have discuss. And these are things that like we're just not gonna like, same with defend, like those are things we just don't know for sure. And so like discuss, they talked about how it can just be a waste of time. Like you could discuss and discuss and discuss and discuss, but you're never going to get to like a main point. And so like the things that we should talk about are the things that we're going to die for. Like what are things that are going to like create a relationship with God and that we can live eternally, you know? So.
Yeah. It's like, what is a salvation,
what saves us?
Issues. Yeah. So what do they have in the defend? Say,
they don't have specific things for the defend and discuss. They just have the things that they die for. But like those other areas, I'm pretty sure you could fill in the gaps. Like, I don't even know. They don't have the specifics in the categories for that, but.
Yeah, because I know like for one, I think defend was like baptism.
Yeah.
Because I know Eagle Brook comes out of a Baptist background. So they're big fans of like doing believers baptism, which I agree with. Yeah. I learned a little bit about the history of like infant baptism and where it comes from. It's more like a Catholic thing. Like you have to be baptized to get to heaven. So as soon as they were born, they'd baptize infants.
Yep.
So I'm kind of a big fan of, and like everywhere in the Bible, it's they believed and were baptized.
Which is interesting because, I mean, you know, my church, my home church, does baby baptisms, but it's Christian Reformed Church, but the Christian Reformed Church doesn't believe that baby baptisms is what saves you.
Yeah.
Like Catholic. So I think it's kind of like reverse. So like I was baptized as a baby, and then a few years ago I did what's called profession of faith, which I think is the opposite of like a more Baptist church like Eagle Brook, which is the opposite.
Yeah.
So it's more like dedication when you're a baby, and then you're baptized when you're older. So I think it's the same idea, they just reversed it. Yeah. So like dedication it's more as a baby being baptized at the Christian Reformed Church it's the parents and the congregation promising to lead that child in a path towards faith and Christ. And then when I took profession of faith, that was more your own
interesting
thing. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They just reversed it. So I don't know why.
Yeah.
I actually think that I like what like baptizing when you're older and make your own decision. I like that more than baby baptism, but because the idea is the same, I'm not like against what my home church does.
Yeah, it's more like the method of doing it.
Yeah.
But as long as the belief is there, as long as you don't believe like, hey, we're baptizing this infant has faith in Christ and is going to heaven, like that's not biblical because they're not able to make that decision yet for themselves. Yeah. So it's just a different method. But yeah, I was baptized as an infant too, and then I was baptized at Eagle Brook.
Yeah.
When we moved up here.
Interesting.
Have you been baptized, Kelsey?
Yeah, I was baptized by my dad when I was like 12.
Oh,
That's
cute.
so cool.
It was cute. Yeah, super cool. But that was at my old home church. But yeah, that's all I got to say about that. I feel like I did it to be dunked more than to like profess my faith, if we're being completely honest here. Like I was not at a place where it was like, oh yeah, probably like, I don't know, I lived a different life. I was kind of just like, I was doing it to go through the motions. And so now it's like, oh, weird. I don't know.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Like
Yeah.
your testimony and then like
Yeah.
your switch from nursing to
I can,
ministry?
yeah.
Because that's a big switch.
That is a big switch. Okay, so I'll keep this shorter on the shorter end because it can be kind of long. But my life, I grew up in a Christian home. I've kind of mentioned my dad was a pastor. He was youth pastor. My mom did a lot of children's stuff. And so it was kind of just something I always knew. I like to tell people that I've known about God since I was in the womb. I'm sure my mom read me stories when I was literally in her stomach. And so it's just something I always knew. I remember like reading the Bible before bed and praying, and I knew that God was always there and with me. So I've been blessed with my family. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like my mom said that I was really resistant to faith though at like a small age. Like I was pretty young. And she like was going to do an analogy with two different shoes one time. And I was like, I went out to the living room. My brother was all in. And I walk out there and I go, not this again. And I run to my room and I shut my door. Like I slammed the door. Like that tells you me as a kid in a nutshell. Like I was just sassy. I don't think I'm sassy anymore. Probably not. That statement just says so much. I'm just kidding.
Just a matured version of sassy.
Yeah, probably.
But
Only
it's
sometimes.
It's still there.
And so, yeah. But then I accepted Jesus into my heart at probably the age of like 8. But I just remember I was like, my mom was in the living room. My brother was like, oh my goodness, I've accepted Jesus into my heart and you have to do it too. And I was like, okay, if it gets me into heaven, like a get to heaven free pass, I might as well, like that was like such a thing. I feel like that kids do is like, it gets me into heaven. So I might as well do it. And so that's what I did. And then I mentioned the baptism thing at like probably the age of 12. And it was just like, yeah, I get to hop in the pool and it's gonna be a cool moment for me and my dad. And like, yeah, I believe in God. So I'm professing that. So it was like half a good heart in it, but also half probably not. And so then all throughout middle school and high school, I just did the good things because that's what I was supposed to do. I was pretty mediocre, like in my faith. I went to youth group and I was good, but I didn't really care about reading my Bible. I was like, I don't like reading, Mom. I'm not reading my Bible. Or like praying. It was just like, God, I need this. Can I get this? It was just like not solid at all. And that like went through my senior year. My senior year was the beautiful year of 2020. We love it. And a lot of my identity was in like what people thought of me and like who I was. I was such a people pleaser, and I am to this day, but it's like I've worked on it a lot. And so like my senior year is like my identity was in who I was, as in like I was the tennis captain, or I was the Minnesota Honor Society like president, or I was going to be the lead in the show that year. Like I had a lot of things going for me. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is great. And then COVID canceled everything and like everything sucked. I'm like, wow, this life, like this just is horrible. And I was just like super down, and I love people. And so I wasn't able to be with people either. And so it took a toll. My senior trip was canceled. I was supposed to go to Greece with one of my best friends. And so it just kind of sucked. And I just went down a bad path of life for about a year. Until my parents caught me in the tracks of a lie. We love that when parents just know.
Ooh, busted.
Moms and dads. They
Mama
always
Jody,
know.
she knew, man. I'll tell you. But yeah, they caught me within a lie, and they just called me out on it. And it was one of the hardest things ever. And then I had to go home with them for this summer. And I'm like, this is gonna suck. And at the beginning, it did. And a lot of my friendships did change. But it also was a time like I was so alone. But it was so obvious that like I was listening to a podcast. Actually, it was Ryan Leake, Eagle Brook. He was talking about being alone. And it was just talking about how God can reach into the darkest moments of our lives. And that's when he is going to work. And I was like, okay, God, like I'm going to believe that. And so I started reading my Bible, and I started like being more intentional about it. And the beginning of my change in my life was like, I want to do this for my parents. I want their trust back. But then it just turned into a lot more. And that's when I started volunteering at church, and that just turned my life around. And me changing my major was like, it was so weird because I helped out with that middle school event, and then I came home every night just so pumped. And then one day I was at work, And I was like, you know what? Like, what if I did like youth ministry? And I was like, no, I would never do that. And I just kind of turned off that idea. And I went to lunch that day. And my mom was like, hey, this is weird. My dad was talking to our family friend, which that family friend is on the leadership team at Eagle Brook. And he was like, hey, like, has Kelsey ever thought of doing youth ministry? And he's known me since I was really little. So he's like, he could see it in me. And my dad's like, I thought the same thing. And my mom's like, I've thought the same thing. And I was like, wow, I thought the same thing this morning at work. That's crazy. And she's like, you did? She's like, you cannot turn that feeling off. Like, that is the Holy Spirit. And I was like, okay, that's a scary thought. And I was like, I want to be a nurse, Mom. Like, I'm not changing my major. And she goes, you don't have to change your major, but like, don't like let go of that feeling. Like, you can do ministry with like while in nursing. But then as I came to school, it was like, oh, like all these different things. Like, I was in all my nursing class and I kept saying, I'm just going to do nursing and then I'm going to go into ministry. And like a lot of my story actually has to do with a lot of the people at Eagle Brook and them seeing stuff in me. And so like, I just remember one week where I was heavily considering changing my major. And I was like, I don't want to. I want to be a nursing major, but like if it's your will, God, I just want it. And one of the pastors was like, oh, the craziest thing. Like, or she was actually a new groups pastor at our church. And she's like, so what do you want to do? And I was like, be a nurse, but I'll probably go into ministry. She's like, that's crazy. I I was a nursing major and I did all my prereqs and then I went to a church thing and then I've been in ministry ever since. And I was like, what the, And then I was like, I'll finish my prereqs this semester. And I was like, and I'm thinking about doing ministry. It's like, oh, we'll keep leaning into that. And a lot of people that week just affirmed it. And then I just remember going to bed one night and I was like, hey, God, like, I want to be a nurse so bad, but if it's your will and you want me to go into ministry full time, you need to make it so evidently clear in my life. Like, I'm not doing this without it being like, you make it clear. And the next morning, you guys, I kid you not, I went to sleep and I woke up the next morning. The first thought I had when I opened my eyes was, I do not want to be a nurse anymore. And I texted my mom and I was like, Mom, I don't want to be a nurse anymore, apparently. And she's like,
Apparently.
Yeah. Apparently. And then she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, you're telling me, Queen. Like, I don't know what's going on.
So you woke up and like just no desire to be a nurse.
No, like I haven't since then.
That's crazy.
Like people tell me things about the nursing program and I'm like, I'm really good chilling in the ministry program. Like we vibe. And like I switched my major then the next semester and everything clicked. Like everything made sense to me. I was not good at my science classes in the first place. Should have taken that as a hint. But like being with the people in the ministry program gave me a whole different perspective on like people. Like I was in class with science people and they're like analytically, like we're coming to this class to do study. And I get to class and be like, hey guys, like how was your weekend? And they just be like studying. And then I switched to ministry and like all joshing around together and we're all just like having a good time. And I'm like, yeah, facts. This is more my realm. So I guess that was kind of longer than I meant it to be, but it's just such a long story. And it's really cool to see God's faithfulness and how if we give him everything, then he'll show up and be like, yeah, I got you. So cool.
That's crazy. First, thanks for sharing. That's a crazy testimony. Yeah. Something I've been like learning lately, and like I came to the realization like a few years ago or whatever, but now I've actually been like saying it out loud, is like I don't believe in coincidences anymore. It's just like if you believe God's in control and there's like a God who's over everything, like there's no such thing as like a random event.
No. And that week was so nuts because then I wasn't supposed to go to chapel that Friday, but a friend who was my old roommate who we didn't leave off on the best terms. She like wanted to come to chapel that Friday. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, sure. I'll go to chapel. And so we went to chapel together and they talked about like Peter and Jesus and how Peter like was like, Jesus, if that's you, help me walk to you. And like, then he starts to doubt and he starts to see the waves and he starts to see the wind and he starts to sink. And he's like, Jesus, where are you? And Jesus like puts his hand out and he's like, Peter, why did you doubt me? And I was like, ooh, am I doubting God? Like, I just need to take that step of faith like that Peter did in the first place. And then he stepped out in the water and he had faith. And I'm like, I'm taking a leap of faith right now. And it's just God's faithfulness ever since cannot even like, it's just so cool. So.
And it shows. I mean, this last year, has been awesome for you. And this last month, has been even crazier.
Yeah.
Is there more from that Eagle Brook conference that you learned about? Like, because you mentioned that they talked about like the systems of Eagle Brook and how they run. I'd love to hear hear some of that and like hear some more stuff you learned from that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just think that their whole triangle, like I talked about the basis of the triangle and I talked about the beliefs and die for, defend, discuss, but then like up that triangle, they like talk about their values and then they talk about their purpose and then they talk about like their mission. And those are like the 4 foundational things that they're like every church should have. And then the top tier is like strategy, like how are we going to do this? And then goals. And so like from the bottom up is just so focused on like Jesus and like what are we trying to do here. So like values are like who are we becoming, and it talks a lot about Acts 2 and like this is what our goal is and like this is what we value. And so like bringing it down, so a lot of Eagle Brook things is like a lot of people be like, why don't they have college ministry, why don't they have like this
Well, they do now, actually.
well, yeah, that is new, but yeah, just like more of that. I don't know, like lots of different things that churches might have. And so they're like, we had to simplify to multiply. And so they talk about like how they had to get another boat. Like they're like, they talk about, I think that's one of their other actually values, but like how, what's the story? There's the story in the Bible, I think it's in Matthew, where like their boat was just so full and they need to get another boat. And so they're like, we need to simplify our systems and all of the things that we're doing so that we can multiply and get another boat, as in like other campuses that they have.
I love that analogy. That's so good.
It's so good. I forget what it was from though. This book is just, man, it's got a lot of good stuff and I took a lot of notes in it.
Well, one of the interesting things that like is I got a book. I don't know if it was when I started volunteering or something, where I got a book where they kind of dive into the like the values and stuff. But it's really interesting that like I think there's 6 levels, but 4 of them never change, and they make that very clear.
Yeah.
So what are the 4 that change, and then what are the 2 that don't?
You mean the 4 that stay the same? And
4 that stay the same.
Are you talking about like the that's in that triangle. So
yeah.
They have, like I've said, the beliefs. Then there's the vision, like who are we becoming? The purpose, why do we exist? Like love, like we exist because we love, and so like we should never drift from our purpose. And so it says that they're like motivated by love and relationships with Jesus, and so like love people so that we can reach others. So it's like we have the bottom beliefs, then values, and there's purpose, and then it talks about mission. So like our purpose is to love people, and our mission is so that we can reach others. So like it's just reach people for Christ, and that's what they will live, breathe, and die by. Like love others so that they can get to know Jesus. So yeah, those are the 4 things that will never change. And then like strategy, those things will pretty much stay, like those things can shift, but it is interesting because when they talked about like strategy and all that sort of stuff, it's like, how is this working? And I think I'm getting some of these mixed up because I'm still learning. Obviously, I'm just in the beginning of this program, but they talked about how everything is the same at every single campus. If there's like a stand within the kids area, there's going to be a stand in the kids area at every single campus. Like they talked about the cheese ball method and how it's like, it makes things so simplified. So let's say like we sent everybody out to get snacks for Sunday kids ministry, and they'd all come back with something different, and the price would add up instead of having like a box of cheese balls, and you can just like simplify and give it out like the same thing out to every single person, and it'd be easy. And so sense. Like everything is just so, I guess that's the simplify to multiply. I'm kind of going into different categories here, but.
And it makes it easier if you go to a different campus sometimes. So like sometimes I go volunteer at Blaine, but when I don't volunteer, I go to Ham Lake.
Yeah.
So, but they're the same.
Yeah. Yep. So like they make that also for the kids, because if the kids are going to be switching from different campuses, and they talk about that, especially if you're like leading the kids in like, because I lead Cadodio, which is the preschool programming. And it's like, if the kids are going to go from Blaine to Ham Lake, they want to make this so easy for them to make the transition. So even the actions for the dances are the same. It's crazy.
Well, this is crazy too. But there's like another added benefit of that. And then I think like you've talked about, like it makes switching staff like super easy.
Easy.
If it's the exact
Transitioning.
same thing. And now your dad was in youth ministry, right?
Yep.
And when he started learning about this, didn't he say like that's a great way
Yeah.
to prevent burnout in
Oh,
staff?
for sure. So my dad was in ministry for a really, really long time. So he did youth ministry at our home church that I grew up in for, I don't even know how many years. Maybe it was like 5 or 6. And then we moved to a different church and he was executive pastor. So he did a lot of behind the scenes stuff. He didn't do like preaching, but he did behind the scenes stuff from our planted church. And then by the end, he was like, I just need a break. And he's like, if I would have started ministry at Eagle Brook Church, he's like, I would have like not burnt out. Like as he's like it depends on what kind of ministry you want to go into. So for some people, they want to like go in a youth pastor position. They want to be speaking. They want to be hosting events. They wanted to be like all hands on deck with the kids. With Eagle Brook, it's like you stay in your lane. You do your specific things, and that'll prevent you from burning out.
Yep. And I think of like the verse of like the church is like the body. Like I feel like everyone has such specific gifts that they've been given. It's hard to have a church that only has like 2 or 3 staff members.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of area to cover just with those people. That's a huge advantage of it being a big church is like you can get really good at one little thing where your gifts are, and then you can use that to benefit the church.
Yeah, and like our youth pastor at our church, he's like fantastic at doing like huddles. So like beforehand, and when you lead a huddle, it's basically like you do a mini Devo. So like they have a specific way of leading those huddles, but it's like a story. And then like also pouring into our leaders, because sometimes like our people who volunteer don't like get poured into as much because they're pouring out so much. So like that huddle time is their time to be poured into with like a devotional. And like our youth pastor is so good at doing those. And so like that's his jam. And like also like finding volunteers is like a huge thing that the youth pastors do. So like finding volunteers, doing the huddles, and like a lot of organizing that sort of area. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate how at Blaine, when me and Joey volunteer there for cameras, is between the 9 and 11 service on Sundays, the video director always leads us in a debrief of the sermon. It's not required. It's for anyone in the video production volunteers that want to talk about the sermon, because we're doing cameras and then we go and sit in the back tech room and stuff. It may be harder for us to focus on the message, and because we're not in the sanctuary with everyone else, I think I really appreciate how he leads us in that discussion.
It's good.
And we're able to talk with each other like we did that today. And I enjoyed that. Joey, I don't know, you like that they do that too?
Yeah, I do enjoy that. Sometimes, like today, I was going to get some homework done, but that's all right. I shouldn't be doing homework back there anyways, so it's all right.
Yeah.
And one thing is like with that, is it just reminded me of this, that like Eagle Brook is such like a, how can I do better? Is like, that's the question that they love to hear from like pastors, volunteers, like any of those things is like looking to the person above you and being like, hey, what is an area you think that I could do better in? Because they're just a growing church and they want this to be like just the best it can be. And then so like just being like, how can we grow in these areas and continue to grow? So not just in that, I think there's some value in being a growing church, because I feel like there's a lot of churches today that will just stay the same because that's what they're used to. And like they get so stuck in their patterns and they're like, this is going well, so we don't have to change anything. But there can be a lot of like downfall to that.
Yeah. They're also willing to talk about things that a lot of churches are not.
And that's true. And that's what people want. Like when I think of like churches that aren't willing to change, like I love my grandparents' churches, but it's more like conservative older generation. So change is a lot slower. It takes a lot more people to get behind it. And I think like that can hurt you so much. Like if you want to bring in new people, there's certain changes that you're going to have to be willing to make. And I've really appreciated how Eagle Brook's been able to like talk about hard topics, because I think that's what our generation wants to hear a lot more about. Like something that's super important to us is like transparency, and we want to see that churches are being transparent. about what they're doing.
For sure. And like talking about those hard topics. And yeah, that's been so interesting because how do you approach things like sexual identity nowadays?
Yeah.
Without offending people, but it's like speaking truth in love. And the way that they talk about it is like they study this stuff for a long time before they speak about it.
Yeah.
That's what I've respect about it. It's not like they are just like studying a little bit and then they're just going to preach it. No, they are making sure they get their stuff down.
Well, that's another thing that I really love is, I don't know, have you listened to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill?
I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, well, you really should listen
Okay,
to the whole thing
yeah.
because it's amazing for ministry majors. Everyone should listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
But like an issue in a lot of churches is that the head pastor gets all the control and has no one stopping him. But like at Eagle Brook, there is a lot of limits.
Yeah.
That like Jason isn't just running around running the joint.
No.
And like another thing I appreciate is like they share the pulpit. Like there's probably 4 or 5 different people
That
that
speak.
come in to preach from Eagle Brook. But then they also do guest pastors and guest speakers. And that's so smart.
Yeah.
One, like you get diverse voices, you get different styles and stuff like that. But you also give your pastors a break. Like if you're doing a sermon every week,
Yeah.
you're probably going to get burnt out
Burnt
eventually.
And it gives like Jason time to study topics like sexual identity, which he
Yeah.
preached on a month ago. And that gives him the time that he needed to research that, because he said at the beginning of his sermon, the first week of that series, that he had been working on that for like over a year.
Yeah.
Interviewing people from every spectrum on that debate and doing so much research before he did that. And I think one of my favorite sermons that I've heard him do, just because of the way he did it, and it came from such a good biblical aspect, but it was just the way he talked about it was really good.
The what Kelsey brought up, the truth in grace. Like it's one thing with like
that was a good one.
more modern churches is it's not enough truth.
Yeah.
They're just gonna like shift theological doctrine just a little bit so it's easier to swallow. I think Jason is willing to go there and say the truth, but he does it so good that it's like I think it'd be difficult to get offended at what he says.
Yeah, and like one thing that I also appreciate about the church is like they every single time that they have talked about the church, and they're like, a lot of people are like mega churches, they are horrible because it's just like it's only about the numbers. It's only about the numbers, and you're like, every single time that Eagle Brook has talked about it, it's like it's not about us. It's really not about like us ourselves, Eagle Brook Church. It's not about the brand. It's about what God's been doing. And honestly, they started at such a small church. Like they were tiny church in White Bear Lake in 1972. And then they just grew. And that was because God showed up. And they're like, this isn't us. This is God. Like you would not be able to see this happen. And so like that they're Bob Merritt, who was one of the first pastors there, like they talked about how their like open-handedness was like, because you say so, I will. And like, this is why we're doing this. Like you're saying so. And so we're going to do that. And like, they talked about how when you walk with Jesus, the net will tear. Like the nets will tear and then we'll have to get another boat. Like that's what the point I was talking about earlier. I forgot that I had
the
it
2
here.
boats. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was like, we fall to our knees and like always remaining humble. Like it's not by our strength. It's not us. It's God. Like there's no way that these numbers and them being like debt free, all these other things, that would not be like from themselves. And then sacrificing everything. It's just insane to see like how such a big church doesn't have debt and like how everything is pointed back to God. It's not about the brand. And a lot of people don't think that, which is interesting.
And it's so true. Like if there was major issues and stuff in the doctrine or how they were doing like business and money stuff, like the church wouldn't grow. God wouldn't be behind it. You don't accidentally have a church with 10 campuses and like 20,000 people coming every Sunday.
I think they're at 12 now, actually.
Really? 12
They're
campuses?
going to be 12 with Minneapolis coming in. And then there's also, what's the new one?
Well,
Apple
they're-
Valley?
aren't they moving the campus that's like in a school right now?
Oh, we didn't count online.
Oh, yeah. Because
Yeah, there's
they're
12.
moving. There's one that's like set up in a school.
Yeah.
And they're making an official location
Apple
for that.
Valley.
Apple Valley. So I guess that's not a new campus. It's just they're moving.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So it's about 12-ish after Minneapolis opens.
It's crazy.
When is Minneapolis opening?
It's going to open, I think, in March. Don't quote me on
Really?
that, but
Wow.
it's like insane, you guys. The building that it's going to be put in.
It's gorgeous.
And they're not changing any of the
I love
stuff.
it.
That's so cool.
They're
Yeah.
leaving the stained glass
Yeah,
windows.
they're
Yeah.
keeping
And the
it old.
pews,
And the
right?
pews, yeah.
It looks completely
We gotta go, you guys.
different.
Well, we for sure got to go.
Completely different than every other Eagle Brook campus.
Yeah, it's
You would
unique.
not know it's an Eagle Brook campus.
It's literally
walking
right by the Orpheum.
Yep.
And they have all these like things, and they're like, it's going to be the same thing, but with our lighting. Can you imagine? That's
it's
going to be
so
crazy.
cool. It's
and
gonna be gorgeous in
Well,
there.
and I think it's a lot bigger deal than the other campuses.
Yeah.
Because if you look at a map, we're in the suburbs like every other campus. And I really appreciate, I think Jason has been pushing for it huge to get a campus down there.
There's a need.
Yeah,
for
it's like
Minneapolis.
now it's time to see what Eagle Brook's made of.
right.
Because downtown's not going to be like
No.
Blaine.
No. And that's why they're like, our next places we want to go is Minneapolis, Fargo, and Duluth. Because
Yeah.
Fargo and Duluth are not reached places, and they're like, we need to go to those places. Like, we need to go where God is calling us. So cool. It's like beyond me, man. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what the Minneapolis campus is like, and it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be cool.
Well, and another thing that like is so amazing about Eagle Brook that we haven't even talked about. Wow, we're going on for hours about this, but
Hours.
the
Can you tell we go to this church?
yeah the viewing
Not biased.
groups. Yeah, the viewing groups.
Yeah.
How amazing that is
Oh,
for
yeah.
people.
Booze bar.
The
Booze bar.
bar, the winery. I remember Jason making a great joke about that. Like we found our niche is in bars and wineries.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin. But yeah, like there's so many places that like they just put up a TV and they set out chairs and people you can get small like 2 or 3 families coming, or I think there's some that have like a couple hundred and stuff coming to it. But it's so nice like if you want to have a church but you can't either afford or find a good pastor and staff, but you still want great worship and a great message.
Yeah.
You can just stream that from a
Yeah.
TV
Yeah.
and you're done. And, it's
And that was
great.
like huge during 2020. Like that's how my family started going to Eagle Brook. Like because when we left our church, my junior year, it's like we didn't have a place to go, and then COVID hit, and then we're like, my dad knew of Eagle Brook because they kind of attended when it was small, like White Bear Lake, like the beginnings, and now he was like, yeah, we'll go online, and like we like this church, and then we just started attending online regularly on Sundays as a family.
Yeah,
Well-
I think what drew so many people to them during COVID was that they already had such a high quality live stream
Yeah.
well, this is
when
the,
COVID hit,
this is the crazy thing.
and other churches didn't. So a lot of churches were scrambling.
yeah. Well, this is where we go back to the Holy Spirit working at that
Oh,
church.
for sure.
They had the decision before COVID, like 3 months before COVID, where they needed to upgrade their satellite or whatever to send
Online.
out their message. And it took like $5 million. It was millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And everyone looked around like, we don't know if this is smart investment or anything. But I don't know who pushed for it, but the board decided to go through with it, invest all this money. They got everything set up, and then
COVID.
boom,
Yeah.
COVID hit. It's like,
crazy.
that's not a coincidence.
I didn't know that was only a few months beforehand.
It was insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Like
Wow.
God's hand was on it the entire time. And it's just so dang cool. Like I get fired up about that sort of stuff. Like every single Wednesday, every single Sunday I come back from church and I'm just fired up.
That's so
not
cool.
about the church, not about like the small things, but it's about seeing lives changed.
Yep.
And seeing people just love others for Christ. And like even just the aspect of welcoming. Like there's a lot of churches that aren't just super like they're not welcoming. Like don't we want to see people come to church? Like they talk a lot about filling the seat next to you. How can we fill that seat? Invite someone to church. Invite someone to Wednesday nights. Like invite a friend. And like how we can see lives change through that. So, oh my word.
Yeah,
So
and I know, and cool thing about like just being welcoming is I haven't been to many of the campuses, but I know at Ham Lake, and I know a lot of people like come in and they see the worship, they perceive it as like this concert, like all these people on stage are just like these professional music artists, and then they go backstage and don't sit with us or whatever. But at Ham Lake afterwards, the musicians are always by the doors.
Yeah.
Or at least a few
Yeah.
of them are always by the doors
Yeah.
saying bye to people,
Yeah.
which I think is cool that
It is
get
awesome.
that personal aspect. So you get
Yeah.
to know them maybe a little bit,
Yeah.
and the next time you see him on stage, you're like, oh, there's Bryce. I said bye to him.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
oh, there's Bryce. He's playing. I know who he is.
Exactly. And that's the same thing with Wednesday nights with the kids. And they didn't do this last year, but like we've had pretty consistent worship leaders on Wednesday nights, and they'll play with the kids beforehand. And so that the kids can like interact with them when they're still on the stage. And it's not about being like, look at us, we're on stage, we're awesome, like we're good at singing. No, it's about interacting with the kids beforehand and then bringing like the posture of worship to them on the stage, but not from an aspect of, oh, we're celebrities, you know.
Yeah.
But,
And they listen to people too, because I know with the Ham Lake campus being Horizons before, a lot of people that went to Horizons, some left, but a lot stayed at the Ham Lake campus. And I remember hearing that right away. I mean, they had their usual, like they had some of their band members coming to play worship at like one of the first few Eagle Brook campuses, and people that went to Horizons were like, we want to see people that did worship at Horizons, like who also are now doing worship at Eagle Brook. So they did that. Jalen, who we've talked about in one of the episodes, and who goes to school with us here, and me and Joey went to high school with, she sung at Horizons on Sunday mornings, and she auditioned to sing at Eagle Brook.
Yep.
And they weren't putting her at Ham Lake right away. And then people wanted people they recognized. So they brought Jalen on. I think one of the electric guitar players, I think his name is Mike. He played at Horizons. He plays at Ham Lake a lot. Yep. So just they listened, and now a lot of times it's people they recognize from Horizons up on stage, at least in the earlier times.
Well, and all of us serve, and that's another thing that came to my mind is another people. Like a lot of people are like, it's too big of a church. You can't create community. Like, what are you supposed to do? Like, and also the fact of like we can't grow in our faith. Like the messages aren't deep enough. But it's like they value serving. Like Jesus came here to serve, not to be served like he could have, but like to serve others. And so that's one of the goals of the church, and like that's how you create community. That's how I met so many people, was through serving. And
they push it. They push it a lot.
And I grew in my faith in that way, because I was like, how can I pour into myself so that I can pour out better to other people? And that was a huge point of my faith too, is like, how am I supposed to be a role model for these middle school girls when my life looks so bad right now? Like, that's horrible. Like, I want to be living my life for God. And obviously it started off as people pleaser. I need to be a role model for other people, but also being like, no, I want to be on fire for the Lord. And I want other people to feel that too, because he's awesome.
Yeah, well, that's something that's like crazy that like I think some people like don't get or don't want to admit is like, you really can't be in community with that many people at once. I mean, Jesus spent 95% of his time with like 12 dudes. Like
12 dudes.
That's it. So like you really don't need to be friends or know that many people at Eagle Brook
Small groups.
to make it feel small.
Small groups.
Yep. Small groups.
Shameless plug. I'm not in a small group. I've thought about doing one like for young adults, but I think I do enough volunteering. I don't think I need to start a group at this point in my life.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Don't burn yourself out.
I kind of view like Northwestern and my friends at Northwestern as kind of like my small group.
My small group, yeah.
Yeah. They're my people.
Yeah. And like not a lot of people from school go to Eagle Brook, and they have a bad rep. And so I was actually asked the other day, they're like, how do you feel that you don't go to church with people from school? And I'm like, there's so much value in like being away from our bubble and being with other adults. Like we need adults in our lives who can pour into us in different ways and not just be with college students all the time. Mm-hmm. So I value my Sundays away from college students as much as I love all my friends. But
so when you see me at the Ham Lake campus, you're just like, ugh.
Yeah, I say, ew, why is Micah here?
I have to see people from school.
Ugh.
There's definitely
That's what I think when I see you.
I know, that's gross.
Yeah, I just won't look at you again then.
Yeah, facts.
There's definitely some people that go to the Blaine campus. So I doubt many Northwestern students go up to Ham Lake.
No, people don't.
Mike's just a simp, so he goes
Hey,
up there.
whoa.
Yeah, he is. Facts. But Ham Lake is superior. Come on.
Ham Lake is nice.
Whoa, controversial.
Just kidding. It doesn't matter. They're all doing the same
They're all doing the
thing.
same thing.
Exactly.
But I saw Ren at church today.
Yeah, we did.
So
And his girlfriend.
Oh, cute.
Mm-hmm.
Little kiddos.
Yeah.
okay, so I think we've been really nice to Eagle Brook, but we should offer some constructive criticism.
Oh.
So,
Wow.
Kelsey, you are queen of Eagle Brook.
Queen. That's such
Queen
Oh my
of
word.
Eagle Brook. What changes, what things do you think they could improve on?
Ooh. I think one thing I've always questioned has to do with the college ministry, but they've actually been more diligent with that. Because last year I was talking to one of the leadership staff and I was on a tour with him. And I was like, so like, I have a question, like, why is there no college ministry? Because there's such a gap there. And like, I've talked to my dad about it before and he's like, well, it turns into like a singles ministry. And then when people pair off, everyone leaves. And so like, what is young adults ministry? What's the ages there? Because they just started doing stuff and it was like 19 to 29-year-olds. I think, 18 to 29. That's a large gap. Like a lot of life can happen there. I feel like if I would do that again, I would split it in half. I would do like 19 to, 22, 23. And then the other gap, because like there's just such different life.
I mean, you're talking about people who are in college and people who are married and have kids.
Oh yeah, there was
at the
definitely
opposite ends of these spectrums.
There's definitely somebody there with a baby, and I say, "What the? I am like 20."
Yeah, that's one thing we've talked about in ministry classes a lot. Is like once you get married and have kids, those are kind of the big two things that happen. Your friend groups and who you want to be around shifts. Like you can still have the same friends, but if you're going to do a small group and trying to talk about what's relevant in your life,
it's gotta be with couples.
Yeah, like single people and people with kids.
Yeah, different.
It's not gonna go great.
No, it'll be a lot different. And so I think that would be a huge thing. Is just like, and they're still figuring that out. Like, how are we going to best accommodate towards college students, but also like young adults? Because there's also a gap of once you graduate college, like if people are married, like what, and they want to be connected to other people and they just don't have people, where are they going to go? So I feel like that's just like a weird area to figure out. Yeah, I'm trying to think, what are my other thoughts? Do you guys have thoughts?
Sometimes I feel like they could go a little deeper into messages. Ooh,
I agree.
This is okay. Here's a great question. Me saying it's a great question. I don't know if you guys will think it's a great question.
It's a great question that I'm making up right
So, Pastoral Foundations class, we did book reviews. Somebody did a book, and they were like, the book was like top 10 things you're looking for in a church. The number one thing was very interesting. And now I can't remember the name of it, but it's the opposite. So Eagle Brook does more like topical sermons.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
What's the name of the one where you only do
passages?
You pick a passage?
You pick a passage.
That was the number one thing.
Interesting.
That they were like, that's the number one thing to look at at church. And I was like, I don't know if I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's something that Eagle Brook does, is more topical.
Yeah. I'll tell you what though. When I was a beginning like believer, growing up, I went to a church and they just go through scripture and I would die of boredom.
It gets boring.
Yes, I get so bored because I'm a person who learns from stories. And so when I came to Eagle Brook for the first time, I think the first time we actually went to a campus was probably when I was like 16 or 17. I left actually understanding something. And so like Eagle Brook, a lot of people say it is for the newer believers, but I feel like you can get stuff even still as believers, like more mature believers. And so, I don't know, take that or leave it, but
yeah, that's an interesting one.
It is.
Because like maybe for Sundays, I guess I kind of like the topical one.
Yeah.
But like if I really want to do like a deep Bible study, like doing this paper has been helpful for me. Like you can get a lot out of a few verses. And one thing like that the book mentioned, and I've heard other people say it, is like context is so important. Like even splitting up like chapters in like the verses of Paul or something, you miss what the overarching theme of the letter is, because it's a letter to someone. It has the same theme throughout. You can't just pick like one verse out of there and fully understand what it means. So I don't know how I feel about that one.
I feel like I've talked with other people about this before. I feel like there's something really important with like, give up my preference for his purpose. That first of all, and being like, this might not be what I prefer, but also like I can do my Bible study on my own. And I found a lot of value in that. And it's like recently I've been going through Genesis. And it's like when I'm going to read the chapter, but then after I read the chapter, I'm going to be like, wow, I got nothing out of this. But then I go to get my commentary. What does my commentary say about this? And I'll be like, well, a lot more than I thought. And so like you can do your Bible study on your own. Like you don't need somebody to constantly be like pouring into you, because there's a lot of people who just go to church to be poured into. Like,
That's
how many
true.
times do people go to church to pour into others?
Oh,
Just a thought.
that
Food
is
for thought.
That's a
No,
takeaway
that's
quote.
good.
That's a takeaway quote from the podcast.
That came
was,
to my mind. Was that the Holy Spirit?
That was
that
no
might-
coincidences.
No coincidences don't happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just a thought. Like, how can we serve others best? And church is a great place where we can serve others. And that's why I love serving.
Yeah. Here's a question for you.
Okay.
Because we've talked about like youth ministry in some of my classes. I don't get a lot. You get a lot more youth ministry classes. Yeah. Do you feel that parents aren't pouring into their kids enough? Because I've heard, I don't know who said it, but someone said like the parent should be the primary spiritual guide to the children. And I'm interested to see if you think that parents aren't doing a great job of that right now.
I feel like it depends on the family. I feel like your parents could do so much, but having that in your life is not going to be the main deciding factor. Because like for my family, my parents were constantly pouring into me growing up. But I didn't want to listen to my parents because you know how middle schoolers and high schoolers are. They don't listen to their parents. Like their parents could be doing everything. And I do think that looking back now, it was helpful. But also, I didn't have Christian friends at high school. I didn't have Christian friends, and I didn't have any like older, like maybe 2 years older than me, girls in my life who were like super solid in their faith. And that took the toll on me, is not having at school a solid group of Christian friends that I could grow with, because I didn't care about it then. If all my other friends were living their lives for sports or whatever else they were doing, I was like, yeah, whatever, that's what I'm going to do, because middle schoolers don't listen to their parents. What the heck?
But they listen to cool youth group leaders named Kelsey Reynolds.
Oh, you're so funny. You're so funny. Thanks for the hype. But yeah, like that's why I love being a youth group leader, is because when I was in youth group, I feel like I had an okay youth group experience, but all of the people at my church were probably like 40 years and older. And they were all my youth group leaders. And I think that there's so much value in having wisdom and like those older people in your lives, but also having somebody who's just a step ahead of you. And so being like, I understand what you're walking through. I did that about 5 years ago, but there's a different path. Like you can just see things a little bit farther ahead. And I'm not saying that the older people can't, but like with relevance nowadays and like TikTok and like everything that's on there, which, that could be a whole different topic, but just how you can be relevant to the kids and be like, I hope you realize that I was in your shoes not too long ago. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And so, I think parents are key. Like if my parents weren't solid in their faith, I would be down a whole different path. But so that's like foundational. I feel like that's super important. But more than that is I wish I had Christian friends or like someone who was college aged. So
Yeah, I think we've been middle schoolers. I think we remember looking up to people in high school and people in college and think they're just the coolest people ever.
facts.
Yeah, if you're a
And
middle schooler listening to this, they're not that cool.
No,
I
they're
am
not.
one. We're not that cool.
No.
We don't feel as old as we thought people our age were when we were younger. But what I'm saying is like people will listen to you if they look up to you. And I think having solid Christian young adults like our age teaching middle schoolers, I think is so important.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, because they will look up to you. And I think same with your camp this summer when you worked there. You have to be fun. You have to like be a good spiritual leader for them.
Yeah.
And I think your girls loved you every week in camp because you're a fun person and you
Most
help
of the
them
time.
most of the time when you aren't cranky.
Oh, whatever.
And you help them with their faith.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. I think it's hard to find people who are willing to step into a position at being a youth leader or youth group leader like you are, especially guys our age. I think I know a lot of churches have a hard time finding
Guys.
20-something-year-old guys
That's
to
hard
lead
at
middle
camp
schoolers.
too. So shameless plug for all you out there. If you want to work at a camp, come to Trout Lake Camps and be a cabin leader. But yeah, I think that's super legit. And like, there's a lack of people because a lot of students will be like, I don't have time. But I just remember like when my life was changing and shifting gears, this was kind of like more of a, not a specific person. I mean, it is a specific person, but Sadie Robertson's podcast, like poured life into me. And that's because she was just a step ahead of me in life. And she could be like, yeah, I understand what you're going through. I was here a year ago. And I was like, what? So, yeah. If anybody wants to be leaders at church and they feel like the Holy Spirit is leading them to do it. Like, step into that.
We need more of them. We need a lot more of them.
You guys could do it too.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, you are.
I'm not, but I volunteer in other areas.
Stop it.
And-
okay.
There's a place for everyone. Not everyone's called to be a
No,
pastor.
no.
Joey has said this quote before, I think.
That is very true.
It is biblical. Not
Very
everyone
true.
is like called to speak.
You need nurses, you need engineers, you need
Video editors.
video.
Well, and you
people.
can do ministry in whatever realm you work in. And some people are
Absolutely.
like more specific, as it was for me. It was very clear that I was supposed to do specific ministry. And I was like, I can do ministry in nursing. Well, God said no. So, do ministry wherever God is calling you.
Absolutely. We're all called to ministry. Just some of
Facts.
us vocational ministry.
Facts.
But we all are. And in a lot of ways, people who are not in vocational ministry have more opportunities to do like on the ground,
Yeah.
day-to-day ministry.
So true.
They
so
have
true.
great opportunities.
Because you're seeing people that maybe aren't at church at all. But if you're working in a church, it's like, maybe it's their first time. You don't know, but
Yep.
could be just regular attendees.
Yep. You're kind of in a bubble.
LOL, the Christian bubble.
Yep. Well, for the first podcast with a guest, I think that went
I think
phenomenal.
that was pretty good.
We've hit a lot of different areas. But
It
thank
was
you
a
for
good-
having me, you
yeah, it
guys.
was a good
This
discussion.
has been fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Of course.
It was great talking to you. I think we'll probably have to have you back at some point.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
Always inviting me
If
back.
you want to come back on,
Yeah, I would.
of course.
It's been fun to talk about these things, and I think that they're really important to have conversations about for other people to hear.
Absolutely. Well, start off by saying goodbye to the people.
Thank you for coming to the 3, 4, 5 podcast. Did I do that?
245 podcast.
Oh, apparently I'm a little dyslexic. Thank you for coming to the 245 podcast. We'll catch you here next time.
Catch you on the flippity flip.
Peace out, gangsters.
Peace.